Well, hello there. If you are inside Canada on a work or study permit, or if you're here as a visitor and your document, your permit is about to expire and you're in the process of applying for an extension, what happens during that period of time between when you have applied for the extension and before a decision is made by the immigration authorities? Do you have authorized status in Canada? Yes, you may likely will have what's called maintained status, or what was previously known as implied status. Hi there, welcome back. My name is Donovan Francis. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer at GOOSELAW Immigration, and we help businesses get their Canadian visas without the legal hassle. In this video, I wanted to talk to persons who are inside Canada, whether you are a work permit holder or a study permit holder, or you are with a company that has employees who are on work permits. I wanted to talk about what happens during that period of time between which an application has been submitted for an extension of a work or study permit and where the immigration authorities have not yet made a decision on whether or not that application to extend will be approved. What happens during that period is that, provided the application was submitted according to the requirements, which we'll touch on, once that application was submitted according to the requirements, the applicant will continue to have authorization to remain in Canada in what's called maintained status, or what's formally known as implied status. So maintained status, simply as the name suggests, allows the foreign national to continue inside Canada under the same conditions, the same status as they would have had previously. In order to fall into implied status, you would have had to submit an application to extend your current work or study permit or your visitor record. And that application to extend must have been submitted before the expiration date on your original application, right? So if you were issued a work permit that is scheduled to expire next week, then you will have to submit an application for an extension of that work permit before the date, before next week's expiration date, okay? If your application is submitted afterwards, you will not fall into maintained status. You would have already fallen out of status. So that's a key requirement, that your application to extend, whether it be your work permit or your study permit or your visitor record, that application must be submitted before the expiration date that would have been written onto the face of your initial work permit, the one work or study permit, the one that's about to expire. Okay, so assuming that the new application was submitted in accordance with that requirement, then you will fall into maintained status and will remain in maintained status until the immigration authorities make a decision on your application. Okay? Now, it's important to note that when you're in maintained status, you are allowed to continue doing what you were doing inside Canada. So if you were working, you're allowed to continue working on the same terms and conditions as you were before. And that applies where you're studying as well. It becomes an issue, however, if you decide that you're going to be traveling outside of Canada while you are on maintained or implied status. If you decide that you're going to be traveling outside of Canada, with few exceptions, but if you decide you're traveling outside of Canada, then what it means is that when you return to Canada, you will have lost your maintained status and you will not be able to resume working or resume studying when you are allowed back into Canada. Now, as to whether or not you're going to be able to re-enter Canada is going to be dependent on a separate thing, and that is whether or not you have a valid visa. If you're from a country whose nationals are required to have a visa to enter Canada, you are going to have to ensure that you have a valid visa. that allows you to enter Canada. And remember, the visa is something entirely different from the work permit or the study permit. Okay, so you will need to ensure that you have a valid visa that allows you to re-enter Canada. If you're from a visa exempt country, then you typically would not require, you do not require a visa to enter Canada. However, the immigration officer or the border services officer is going to make an assessment at the port of entry to determine whether or not you should be allowed back into Canada. But in either case, if you are allowed back into Canada, you will not be able to resume working or studying until a decision is made on the application that you would have submitted. So that's important. Now, the one exception to that travel outside of Canada rule is that if you had traveled to the US, so you're here in Canada, you're on maintained status, but you decide to travel to the US and a couple of other island states, but we'll talk about the US primarily in this video. If you decide to travel to the US, you will be allowed to re-enter Canada, notwithstanding the fact that you're in maintained status, and more importantly, you will be able to continue working or studying without an issue. But this exception only applies to the US primarily, okay? So that is what maintained status is, and the previous name was implied status. And again, it is going to apply only where the application to extend was made before the expiration of your current work or study permit or visitor record, okay? And traveling outside of Canada to any country other than the US and 2 other stated destinations, you will not be able to resume work or study inside Canada if you are allowed to re-enter Canada while in maintained status. Okay, so I hope you found value from this. As always, remember to like our video so others will see more videos like this. Subscribe to our channel and visit us at go.gooselaw.com. Thanks, see you again.